Hello out there, and taking a quick first look today at the newly released Spyderco Amalgam. And the Amalgam is a design from a guy named Brian Lai, and he made this knife basically on a computer program and sent it into Spyderco, and they really liked it, and they worked on it with them and tweaked it, and now we have this new for 2018 design. And guys, I'm sure a lot of you who follow the channel are probably thinking that I am not going to like this knife at all just because of the overall size of it. You know, coming in at 9 inches of total length, a 3.5-inch blade length, you know, just a very long knife. It is definitely outside of the spectrum of things that I would ever want to EDC. And this actually isn't even my knife. I picked it up for a buddy of mine. I'm forwarding it his way, so I'm not even the guy who bought the knife, but I do have it in front of me for one quick day, and I wanted to give my impressions on it. One, to help some of you make an informed decision if you were interested in it, but also because it is a real surprise to me. I mean, this knife surprised me a lot, just how much I liked it, how well it's put together and built. You know, nothing fancy about this knife at all, but just very simply executed and very well done from Spyderco. So I'm impressed, and I like it. And I didn't think, you know, when I saw the stat line on this knife, that would ever be the case. So we're going to get into all that, talk about what makes this knife great, one thing that would make it an absolute home run. Yeah, and we'll go from there. So starting with the big talking point in size. So this knife, like I said, 9 inches of total length. You can see lined up just under 3.5 inches of cutting edge. So it's big. You know, it's so big that if I put it down at the bottom of the frame, you can't even see the whole darn thing. So pushing it up here. So we're going to be like looking at the top of the screen, but that's going to be okay. Next to the Paramilitary 2, you know, you can see that it is about 3/4 of an inch longer overall. Maybe a little bit less, but you know, if you stack the knives on top of each other, you can really see the difference. You line them up at the back, yeah. So, much larger there. Here it is next to the 943, much larger there. Civivi backlash for reference, much larger there. And the mini griptilian, just for fun. And I keep saying larger, but that actually is not accurate because it's longer, but it's not really a large knife. And I think that's the big surprise of this this design for me, is how thin it is and how a knife of this length can be streamlined. But it really is. You know, taking a look at the width of the knives, you know, it is pretty comparable next to the Paramilitary 2. Pretty darn comparable next to the 943. I think the 943 is a little bit thinner. The Civivi is a thicker knife. And surprisingly, I mean, look at the thickness, you know, where the handle swells on the mini grip. Look at that. It's comparable. So this knife, even though it's so long, I mean, it is streamlined, it is light, it feels like nothing in the hand. And we'll get to that in a minute. You can see some of the milling on the nested liners down there too. So just a lot of things going into making this a thin and easy to carry knife despite the length. Here's the weight on it. 4.3 ounces, which again, for the size is super light. The Civivi, just for reference, comes in at almost 4 ounces. The Paramilitary 2, 3.87. So, you know, it really doesn't feel like all that much in the hand. And we'll get to ergonomics in just a minute, so we'll talk about that. For the people who want to see the knife in the closed position, in the closed position next to the Paramilitary 2, let's do that real quick. Really not that different. So, all right. But getting into the blade, 3.5 inches of cutting edge, just a little bit under. S30V blade steel. I really like S30V. I know the $170 plus price point is not agreeable for a lot of people for this steel, but it functions really well for me. Spyderco does a really good job with it. Full flat grind. So, yeah, I'm happy with the S30V. I really do like the blade shape, and it reminds me of the Brower that came out recently, and I think that if they had just shrunken this model down to the Brower size, for me, it would be a a much better design and one that I would have wanted to keep for myself. So just it's a little bit of an interesting comparison there. Sort of a spear point blade. I do like the blade shape for this. It is a good like utility blade. It will be good for food prep, especially with the size of the knife. I mean, some versatility there, and yeah, overall high marks for the blade, but Spyderco usually does pretty good job when it comes to the blade. So anyway, moving on back and getting into the jimping. The Taichung Taiwan, I always talk about the jimping from them. It has continually gotten better, and this is no exception. You can actually maybe see right here, it's a good shot of just how grippy that jimping is going to be. There is a lot of it, so it is super comfortable. Get really good grip on it. The forward choil also. So as we get into ergonomics, that is one of the high points of this knife. It is extremely comfortable in a number of different grip configurations. With as much area as there is, though, you'd expect that, right? I mean, it's a big knife. People with all sizes of hands should be able to find a good spot and find comfort in this knife. No sharp edges, so all of the machining is done really well. You can see the amount of real estate that I have left over. If I choke up, even more so. So yeah, getting an ergonomic grip is not a problem at all. Now, talking about the scales, we have the carbon fiber G10 laminate that Spyderco uses. This stuff is good. I know, again, there's people who don't like it, who want real carbon fiber. I don't think that that's necessary from a functional standpoint at all. This stuff works really well. I like G10, the laminate. It looks attractive, and it is pretty darn grippy. One thing about it that I noticed when I got the Mantra 3, where is that knife? So when I got the Mantra 3 about a month or so ago, I noticed that the laminate was higher traction than it had been on the Sage 5. And actually, the Amalgam is higher traction than the Mantra. So it is really good and grippy. There's a nice texture to it. Not too coarse, but definitely a good functional kind of grip to it. It feels like a nice G10, looks like carbon fiber. Yeah, so definitely high marks for that. And like I said at the beginning of the video, not anything new. They're not really, reinventing the wheel, but they're just executing on a high level. So yeah, and then moving on back, you can see we have the open frame construction because of the compression lock. We also have a T8 hardware going all the way across, except for on the pocket clip. So that's definitely a good thing. A small lanyard tube. For comparison, look at this next to the Paramilitary 2. And then the pocket clip is also the same as the Paramilitary 2. And what I'll say about the clip is, while a lot of people like to change the clips out, for longer knives, I prefer a little bit of real estate poking out of the pocket. I really don't think that this clip on the Paramilitary 2 needs to be changed. I changed it on my Para 3, but not on this. It's a little bit iffy though. But for a knife of this length, I think I would definitely want to keep this clip. So that's just me. I know that clip has its faults, and it's not a perfect one, but I think on this design it works well. 4 positions for that. And now let's get to the main event, the best part of the knife. It's going to be the action. The action on this is fantastic. It's running on bearings. It is super, super smooth. I'm going to have to lift up the camera for you to be able to see. So it just drops shut. I mean, drops shut right out of box. So super smooth, easy to open, spider flick, the flipper. So really good stuff there. Now, as you can see though, the biggest fault of the knife, which isn't really that big of a deal, it's just a nitpicky thing. You can't get the thing completely closed when you try to get it to drop shut because of the flipper tab coming up and getting you. And on other models like the Mantra or the Sliver X, depending on how you held the knife, you'd be able to make it close and actuate despite that. And it seems like on this knife, there's really no way to do that. So it is going to come up and it's going to catch you, and it's not going to be able to close on its own, just dropping it shut. So is that a bummer? Yeah, it is. And I'm going to say something now that I've never said about a knife. If I were to pick this one up for myself, I would 100% do a flipper delete. There are people, every time Spyderco makes a flipper, and with other brands too, but every time Spyderco specifically, the Sliver X, the Mantra 3, people say, oh, I'm going to do a delete, get a Dremel tool or whatever, and just get rid of that flipper. Not keeping it. And, I understand when people do that, but it's never really been something that mattered to me that much. But with this knife, yeah, 100%, I would do it if this were mine. Get that flipper out of there. The action, just opening it with the thumb hole, is perfectly fine. It's more than perfectly fine. It's excellent. So no need for that flipper tab whatsoever. And yeah, it would make the knife close better when you use the compression lock. So overall, yeah, definitely I would recommend just ditching the flipper tab. All right, so let's straighten up and finish up here. The other thing, the lockup is really solid. One minor concern is just how thin that liner is for a knife of this size, but nothing that I've seen thus far would make me think that would be a long-term issue. But you never know, just one thing to look out for. Otherwise, though, guys, at the $170, $175 price point, which isn't really that out of the ballpark for larger knives, I think this is a good one. I really do, and I think that it's one that if they did shrink it down, that I would definitely be interested in. And even at this size, I think that I still have interest in it because it would be really good for food prep. I mean, like I said, super light in the hand. It feels like nothing. There's just a lot of good about this knife that just really took me by surprise. So I would recommend it if you like this design. Maybe not a big beater knife because of how thin it is, but certainly a large EDC folder. Like I said, good for camp use and food prep and a number of other things. So yeah, let me know your thoughts on it. Let me know what you think. What's good about this knife? What would you change? All right. And any other questions, comments, complaints, suggestions, as always, let me know down below. I really appreciate it, guys. Thanks for watching and take care. Have a good one.